Today, we are going to extensively talk about Google, which may potentially limit or even completely shut down its operations here in this region, including its popular platform YouTube, primarily because of the significant censorship being imposed by the courts and the government on various social media platforms. We're going to discuss all of this in today's video, but first, leave a comment below. What do you think about freedom of speech, about censorship, about government and court control, about what you can post? Comment below. I want to know. Let's go straight to my computer screen. Today, I brought in a specialist in the field, and at the end of the video, I'll leave a link to his channel. I watch his videos almost every day, and just a reminder, I'll be sharing my own thoughts too because I have 12 YouTube channels. Now, today is going to be complete in just 9 monetized channels anymore, but 10 monetized channels. I even made a video about it. But if YouTube leaves here, right, from my country, from Brazil, basically, what am I going to do? I have a channel in English. I have a channel in Spanish. I have a channel in German. So I'm going to talk about that. Whether you should be worried if you have a YouTube channel, if you're screwed, if it's the end of the world, or if there's a way to fix it. Shall we talk about it then? Let's go. 3, 2, 1, go.
This is Capso, and now we're going to talk about Google. The director of Google for Brazil gave an interview saying that depending on the outcome of the case in the Supreme Federal Court, the STF, that censorship case, right? The trial on the unconstitutionality of the Marco Civil da Internet, specifically Article 19 of the Marco Civil da Internet, depending on how that trial goes, Google might restrict its services in Brazil. That's obvious. It's almost unnecessary to even say something like that. It's obvious, right? We've already explained here how, depending on the final outcome, it could make it completely unfeasible to have social networks in Brazil.
Let me just make a comment, okay? Even though this is happening in Brazil, this issue of censorship and freedom of expression is happening all over the world. So if you're from another country and you're listening to me in Spanish, English, or German, stick around until the end of the video because this is relevant to you too. All right? Let's keep going here.
Look, Google isn't just social media. Google has a ton of things, like artificial intelligence platforms, data storage platforms, all kinds of services, right? Social media is just one part of it. YouTube, for example, is part of Google, right? Now, obviously, a lot of things could become unfeasible in Brazil, depending on how this all turns out in the end. Let's understand this case here. Will Brazil end up joining China, North Korea, Iran, Pakistan, and other dictatorial countries that have actions that have restricted things on Google? Google operates in China too, but in a limited way, exactly as it might have to operate here in Brazil. This news was suggested by Ascone do Estado, Zenildo, and several other people. Thanks to everyone who suggested news on our website, visonlibertaria.com, and thank you for watching our video. If you like our content, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, okay?
Subscribe there and subscribe here too.
Well then, Google might limit its operations in Brazil if the Supreme Court drastically changes the rules, right? So, of course, Fabio Coelho, who is the president of Google in Brazil, gave an interview and warned about the risk, right? And he's right. It's obvious that this risk exists, isn't it? Commercial companies, they're here to make money. If it's not feasible, if a huge legal liability is created here, if there's no more money to be made here, people will just leave, right? Here, look. The president of Google Brazil, Fabio Coelho, expressed support for the proposal to include serious crimes, child exploitation, and terrorism as exceptions to Article 19 of the Brazilian Internet Civil Framework. So let's recall the story, right? Article 19 of the Brazilian Internet Civil Framework states, the Internet application providers such as a social network, YouTube, X, Facebook, WhatsApp, can only be held civilly liable for damages resulting from third-party content if, after a specific court order, it fails to take action within the scope and technical limits of its service and within the designated time frame to make the content identified as infringing unavailable except as otherwise provided. In other words, if the court orders the social network to take something down, it has to take it down, right? Yeah, look.
Well, let's talk about this, shall we? Because I'm a lawyer, I graduated back in 2007, okay? Basically, here's the thing. One scenario, which is what happens today, is if I post something on the internet, someone feels harmed, files a lawsuit, wins, and then the court orders YouTube to take down the video. So there's a whole legal process that follows the law. That's perfectly fine. What is going to happen, or indeed what is already happening, is basically this. Before there's even a formal legal process, the government itself or the judicial system goes and explicitly states, look, I firmly believe that this particular topic discussed in Rodrigo's video has significantly harmed a certain individual person or a specific group of people. Take the video down. And then they go after Google, in this case after YouTube, but there wasn't any legal process. No one filed a lawsuit, nothing like that. Two spoke badly about the government, for example. The government goes there and asks YouTube to take the video down under threat of, you get it? But there's no legal process. So what is that? That's censorship. Because if you speak well of the government, that's allowed. But if you speak badly, it's not, right? Anyway, right? Let's keep going here. Obviously, if YouTube complies with all this, it will mean that a lot of channels won't be able to express themselves anymore. And then, anyway, a bunch of opinion and political channels and so on will end up disappearing, right? Anyway, let's keep going here.
Take down the post, not the user. But the Marco Civil Internet itself, in Article 21, makes an exception to this. The Internet application provider that makes third-party generated content available will be held secondarily liable for violations of privacy resulting from the disclosure without authorization from those involved of images, videos, or other materials containing scenes of nudity or private sexual acts when, after receiving notification from the participant or their legal representative, it fails to diligently make such content unavailable within the technical limits of its service. So there is a limitation. Article 21 states that a judicial decision is not required in the case of a sexual image if one of the participants in that image requests its removal from the social network, right? So, in other words, this already happens on social networks. Most social networks already automatically block sexual images precisely because of this rule. They don't want to get involved in that. They don't want to get into it, right? So what it says here is that if it includes, there was support for the idea of including serious crimes, child exploitation, and terrorism as exceptions to Article 19. In other words, this exception, which is Article 31, if there is any serious crime, child exploitation, or terrorism, okay, especially because they already do that, this kind of thing is already prohibited. Google already does everything to prevent this kind of thing. They already try to remove any video that has any of these things, right?
And also, people aren't interested in watching videos of serious crimes, child exploitation, or terrorism, right? Anyway.
Yeah, in any case. So he already understands that this is already valid, right? Coelho pointed out that this change would allow platforms to be held liable for content not removed after an extrajudicial notification without the need for a court order.
So that's when I said this is censorship. Look at that. So platforms can be held responsible for content not removed after an extrajudicial notification. What does extrajudicial notification mean? Without a lawsuit, without the need for a court order, which means it's like this. A company feels, harmed, doesn't file a lawsuit, just goes there, sends a notification, and the platform takes it down without any legal process, basically, right? In fact, I recently made a video about a YouTuber who did an investigation, and, well, this investigation was about a bank. Then the bank felt harmed, and let's say the justice system, but without the legal process, sent an extrajudicial notification to the YouTuber not to even post the video. And then the YouTuber posted it anyway, and now there's a fine being imposed. There was a fine for him posting it, and now there's a daily fine being applied. Watch it later. I'll leave that video here, but there are already fines of several $1 million, right? While I'm making this video, I don't even know if that video is still online today. Look it up later. It's Daniel Penin XP Investimentos. Search for it later.
In other words, exactly, he's mentioning here the exception in Article 21. Today, Article 21 only applies to sexual content. And by the way, Article 21 also states that the person who has to make the request is the one who appears in that scene, right? Social networks nowadays ignore this. If there's sexual content, they take it down because of Article 21. Because notice the problem. How are you supposed to handle a case like this, right? For example, if someone says, how is the person supposed to prove it's them? They have a different face. No, but it's me. Or My face isn't showing, but it's me. You have to take it down. There's no way to do that. So it's better to just take everything down. Take down all sexual content, and that's it, right? Since most people who use social media really don't want to see sexual content, then for serious crimes, child exploitation, and terrorism, okay, especially because they already do this, they already remove this kind of content. So what's their difficulty? Look at this. Coelho emphasized the importance of balancing freedom of expression with accountability. He warned that a very broad update to Article 19 could result in excessive content removals, limiting Google's participation in public discussions in Brazil.
Or in Brazil and around the world, right? That's what I said. So there will be a lot of opinion channels, including all the actual news outlets, right? Those programs, those channels that give news and opinions, they're done for. In fact, what's going to happen, right? The people who are in power, right? Oh, they're from the left. So only the left-wing channels won't be interfered with, right? Then later, yeah, a right-wing government will get elected. Oh, now I won't complain about the right-wing channels, but I'll send notifications to take down the left-wing channels' content. Just imagine the kind of problem that's going to cause, right? Anyway, what's my opinion? My opinion is this. Let everything be open, and if a crime happens, the person goes through the legal process, sues, then there's a fine, the person gets arrested, whatever. Then the person is held accountable. That's what laws are for, right?
The executive emphasized that although the company is open to changes, the decision about what should be removed must remain with the courts. Okay? And why is that? Because one of the points being discussed in the Supreme Court is criminalizing things like attacks on democracy or, coup attempts. What's the problem with criminalizing attacks on democracy? Because how do you know if something is actually an attack on democracy? A criticism could be interpreted as an attack on democracy. Here I am, I'm an anarcho-capitalist channel. I hope that one day we'll reach a society with private laws where there will be no more democracy.
The Ancapsu channel will be taken down. If this goes through, the Ancapsu channel will definitely be taken down, right? In fact, he's even mentioned this in other videos. He'll only come back when the government changes.
You hire the state you want to be a part of. There's no democracy, no need to vote. You choose the state you want. Much simpler, much easier, solves all the problems. Is that an attack on democracy or a criticism of democracy? Where do you draw the line with these things? For example, in the so-called, quote-unquote, coup by Alexandre de Moraes, where they're accusing Bolsonaro of staging a coup, they claim that criticizing the electronic voting machines was part of an attack on democracy. What's the logic they're using? That these people were attacking the electronic voting machines to undermine the legitimacy of the election and thus stage a coup against Brazil. The problem is this. They started to suspect everyone who merely criticized the electronic voting machine. And, well, I've never criticized the electronic voting machines. I've always had a different stance on this. I've always praised them and so on. And I've explained several times why I don't see a problem and why, from a technical standpoint, it's an excellent solution for Brazilian democracy. But I've always made it clear that I think people have the right to disagree. Of course they do. Of course people have the right to criticize the electronic voting machines. How could you not allow someone the right to criticize? After all, people have always criticized them. You can look at every past election, there have always been criticism. So how is YouTube supposed to know if a criticism of the electronic voting machine is just a criticism or if it's an attempt to undermine the Brazilian state through...
Yeah, these are very, well, subjective concepts. Let's put it that way, right? There isn't a definition that says, oh, if this happens in that context, it will be against the government. It will be an attempted coup. It will be an attempt against democracy. What is democracy? Anyway, so what's my opinion when it comes to monetization? If you're going to create a channel and you're not passionate about politics and all that, then create channels on other topics that aren't so, let's say, controversial. Now, if this happens in your country, like it's happening in Brazil, which I believe is going to happen first, create an international channel. I specialize in international channels. So if there's ever any problem in Brazil, I have the channel. I have 5 in the United States, 5 in English, 1 in Spanish, and 1 in German. So that already solves that. And there's also the issue of VPNs, right? Suddenly, if YouTube or Google leaves your country, in this example, leaves Brazil, then you'll have to activate a VPN. You'll have to create an account abroad to receive the money there and then bring it here, which is already happening, right? I get paid through an AdSense account in the United States, and then I receive it here in Brazil, right? I'm already thinking about just leaving the money there, not even bringing it to Brazil anymore. Anyway, comment below, what do you think about this? Do you think the government, do you think the courts should get involved with what you post? Should they limit what you post on social media? Comment below, I want to know. If you want to stick with me, I'll leave this video here about the issue of censorship and the YouTuber who's getting fined thousands of dollars, okay? Stay here with me. I'll see you in that video. See you soon.